Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planet Sport. We're not doing it live this time. We're having a bit of a post-production version this week. We're going to be going over quite a lot. We've got quite a bit of boxing, a bit of football, Formula One, because the Formula One season has obviously started, and a lot of us are quite excited about it. It's been an interesting first couple of races or first race of the season. Football, obviously, there's been a lot happening as usual. Boxing, we're going to try our best. I did have some basketball, but I don't think many of us watch basketball. Raise your hand if you watch basketball. Right, well, there you go. That answers it then. I do, but no one else does. So let's begin with the boxing, of course, because that's the topic that we're going to get the least amount of time out of. So I tend to just start with those. Look, I'm not going to pretend like I'm some boxing expert. I watch fights, but that's it really. I'm not like a massive expert on boxing. But we, of course, join with Sam and Matt as usual, who are going to be helping me get through this. Sam's got to go a little bit early today, bless him. Hopefully, I'm going to the beach today, actually. So, get this done, drive down to Liverpool safely, and go to the beach for a bit. Socially distance, go back, sorted. Right, so Dillian Whyte got his revenge win actually over Alexander Povetkin in Gibraltar, which I thought was quite an interesting place to hold the fight. I know that Dillian Whyte has been um, one of these fighters that over the years has been good enough to get to the stages of where he can be in the WC conversation, but he's just never really sort of taken that step. You know, he had his fight against Joshua, which he lost, longtime friends as well, of course. Oh, they used to be best friends. And he's had a lot of big fights that he might necessarily not have performed in, but he's performed in this one. He's managed to get his revenge win over Povetkin, and potentially giving himself a shot at a WBC title. Should he have to wait until AJ versus Fury? It seems as that fight is going to be taking place this year, late this year. Hopefully in front of fans. It would be nice to get some fans into the stadium. I'm hoping by then that we do actually allow fans into grounds. I don't see why not. But guys, what do we think about this then? So Dillian Whyte, he's been around for a while, He's been in boxing quite a long time. Um, and seems to be the conversation we have with him all the time. Does he deserve a shot at a WBC title? So does he? Will he have to wait until? Well, he's going to have to wait until after AJ Fury because AJ Fury, they've got to put as much promotion into this fight as possible, obviously, because it's going to be the biggest fight well, not decades, but it'll be one of the biggest fights in definitely recent boxing history, 100%, and it could be for the next 5 years. Particularly with the names, there's not too many massive names in boxing these days. So, what do we think, guys? What do you think? Give me your opinions on this one. I'll start with Matt.
Gonna throw it straight to me. I haven't a clue.
Well, there
Not
you
a clue.
Go. Okay, so
this top punditry. Look, I don't know a lot about boxing unless it's Anthony Joshua Fury. I only really watch the big fights. Classic one of those fans. But yeah, no idea.
Yeah, well, I'm not really a boxing person myself either, but my perception of it would be that if Fury and Joshua have their two fights signed on for, and we know one of them is going to be late this year, that you wouldn't try and throw in another title fight before that when fans of the sport are sort of building up to that. You'd have, especially because of the amount of time they need to negotiate all of the ins and outs of the contract, you'd imagine they wouldn't be trying to throw something in there in 6 months' time when maybe in 8 months' time there's going to be Fury and Joshua. For me, I'd be looking at it and going, maybe Dillian Whyte has to wait until after that one, but before the second Fury and Joshua fight.
Yeah, I think I'd probably agree there. I mean, are we hoping that fans will be able to be allowed in? Because, if this is late this year, I know we've got fans that are hopefully going to be able to attend the FA Cup semi-final. But I think that is around 4,000 fans that's going to trial it. It's going to be very, very strange fitting 4,000 fans into Wembley. I can't imagine the chants will be that loud. So do you? I mean, do you hope that we can have fans? Well, obviously, we all hope that we can have fans in, but do you think that we'll have a majority crowd in, or do you think it will still be at sort of 50% capacity? 25%, that sort of thing.
What was the date for this again?
I know it's late this year. I can't quite remember though. I think this is November, December.
Yeah, on that basis, I would say that we're 5 months after the end of lockdown and everything. The end of the roadmap is, provisionally ending in mid-June. I would say that if you're talking 5-6 months later, there'll be precautions and stuff still. It'll still be a little bit, maybe masks through the public areas like the concourse bit. But I reckon seating-wise, you'd be looking at 75% plus capacity.
Yeah. Hopefully, I would agree. I can't imagine us being in this position for too much longer. Obviously, social distancing and masks are going to be kept for another 6 months, I think, which is what the government have said up until October, maybe. So we'll have to wait and see. It's one of those, really. We can only wait. And the last bit of boxing news, of course, is that Campbell Hatton, the son of Ricky Hatton, of course, former world championship from Manchester as well. Manchester. So local boy.
Manchester.
Local boy to our area of the north. Yes, he made his professional debut, and obviously his dad is held in very high esteem in the boxing world, and we have seen things like this, of course, happening in football as well. We have Zidane's son playing, Ronaldo's son is rising up the ranks. We have a lot of sort of big name players' sons at the moment that are trying to make it in their sport. And obviously the question is, can the name carry him, or will he have a harder career because of his dad's previous achievements? That is very much the case. Some players get weighed down by the expectations laid on them by, their dad or their brothers. It's a tough one really for him, but a lot of promise. I mean, all of us would probably say to him, to keep a level head and not try and compare himself too much to his dad, because at the end of the day, the worst thing you can do is measure yourself off someone else's expectations. The most important thing is measure yourself off your own. I think if he keeps a level head, is mature about the situation, gets his head down, trains hard and fights well, I think that he certainly could prove to be just as good as his dad. But it's a lot to live up to, but I don't think he necessarily has to live up to it as long as he has a good career for himself. I think that's the most important thing. Right, let's move on to F1 then, because there was quite a lot of action that happened. Actually, it was a very interesting start. Obviously, was the Bahrain Grand Prix.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. I keep forgetting the countries. They got some weird places they race, man. But Bahrain is actually quite nice. Of course, Lewis Hamilton and Max. It says Max here. I'm guessing it's
Max Verstappen.
Verstappen, yeah. Battling it out. Now, there's obviously been some rule changes this season to make the races more fair. Matt, considering this is your real time to shine, because you probably know the most out of the three of us. I mean, me and Sam, I guess, we know a decent amount about Formula One. I've watched it a lot over the years, but I don't think any of us know it as inside out as you do. So what are these new changes, and how is it going to affect the competition this season?
So I think the new rules this season are pretty minimal in terms of, there are obviously the specification changes, and they tweak how engines, how they work, and certain aerodynamic parts that have almost become too successful, they'd get rid of them. I know that Mercedes last season had their DAS, which is dual axis steering, which instead of the steering wheel just turning left and right, it could also go in and out, which allowed them to change what they call the toe of the wheels, which is how much they tilt in and out, which allowed the car to go faster on straights, but then also have the stability and the grip in corners, which a lot of which was a bit of a revelation last season, a massive innovation that they came with, and a lot of teams didn't like it because they weren't, they'd not thought of it and they didn't have it, and it put them at a great advantage. So this season they're without that. However, the proposed rule changes, there's some massive rule changes which are now planned for next year, which were originally planned for this year, but because of the carnage that they had last season with the coronavirus situation and the season getting postponed, and then a lot of teams using their manufacturing facilities to build ventilators and medical equipment and whatever, they decided to delay the changes till next season. So there's a lot of big regulation changes next season, which hopefully should make competition a lot tighter next year anyway. But yeah, I think so far this season we've seen a lot closer competition. I mean, in quali, we saw teams fighting out for the top spot. I mean, Max Verstappen took pole in a race where normally the Mercedes would dominate and would do very well, and Max Verstappen outperformed them by like 0.4. So yeah.
I mean, for me, it's a bit weird to sort of almost hinder Hamilton a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, he's had the dual action steering last year.
Yeah.
For me, it is a bit weird that the teams are like, oh, well, we didn't think of that, so they can't have it, sort of thing.
Yeah, it sort of is. So the problem is you're not allowed to directly copy a competitor's car or something that they do. So if say Mercedes develop a part, so like DAS, another team can't just directly copy it. They have to have kind of evidence of their testing and how they've got it. There was a lot of issues last season with the Racing Point being inspired by the Mercedes, but essentially being the same car of Mercedes the previous year. And as well, like you've got the problem that they've got is that Ferrari and Mercedes have budgets which are massive. 10, 15, 20 times the size of some of the smaller teams like Williams, who just can't compete. So certainly next season, I know that they're bringing in like budget caps, and also meaning that teams can only have a certain amount of staff, because Mercedes have such far greater resources because they've got a lot more money, and then because they're successful, they get more sponsors, so they get more money, and then the cycle just kind of grows and grows and grows. So they've had to bring in more regulations to kind of try and limit it and make it more competitive as a sport.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I'm always fascinated by the technology side of it. I mean, the dual action steering is just like, it's a great.
They say it and you're like, that's really obvious. Exactly, you're like, it's really obvious, but how would anyone come up with that? Like,
yeah,
it's great.
It is good, and I don't know. I don't know how I feel about teams being punished for being innovative. For me, it just sort of, I don't know. I mean, are we gonna, is it gonna stop teams from wanting to try and innovate as much as possible? Because of the fear that it might be actually too good and they can't use it anymore. I mean, I get the balance of play. It's more entertaining. At the end of the day, sport is there to entertain. That's why they're fans. That's been one of the big debates, of course, for me personally. What I've seen on the internet this year is between the NBA and the WNBA is that the WNBA is just not entertaining, so people don't watch it. So there's a big difference, obviously, with making sport entertaining. So I get it, but yeah, I don't know. It's one of those sort of things where I don't know. I always feel a little bit weird when teams are punished for being creative or just good. I mean, I guess obviously they have a much bigger budget, but I don't know. But of course, at fourth place for Lando Norris. I'm pretty sure is he a debutant this year, or did he join last year?
Last year or the year before, I think.
Because I remember him. I remember him joining, but I don't remember when he joined. I can't remember because I know he's a young driver. But fourth place for him. I mean, he's got a lot of potential. Obviously, a lot of us were banging on about George Russell last year. Big Wolves fan, of course. So it was quite. Sam's shaking his head. He's not happy about that one. I somehow managed to bring Wolves into Formula One. But at the moment there is quite a lot of promise in the British Formula One scene. Really, there's quite a lot of young drivers coming through, which is good to see. I mean, what do you think in terms of potential? Do you think that he has the ability to be a world champion, to be the next sort of big British Formula One racer?
I think definitely. I mean, I think we've got the likes of who came in last year or the year before, I can't quite remember, but we've got obviously George Russell, Lando Norris from Britain, and then Charles Leclerc, who's driving for Ferrari now, who's from Monaco.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think those three came up from F2 together, much like we've seen this year, Mazepin, Tsunoda, and Mick Schumacher, kind of making that step from F2 into F1. So I think there's a lot of potential coming through, and, you know, it's good to see that the system is working how it's supposed to, that these drivers come in. And I think Russell, you know, we see him constantly outperforming his teammate, constantly outperforming that car, you know, in one of the worst cars on the grid, which arguably shouldn't be getting into Q2. And there's Russell getting into Q2 pretty much every time. I mean, I think Russell and Lando, it's going to be if they were in the same car or they were in a potentially title winning team, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see those two go head to head in cars which are a little bit more equal than the McLaren and the Williams at the moment. But yeah, I think there's definitely potential there, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this kind of new wave of drivers perform.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking of new drivers, did you guys see, of course, Mazepin spinning out in his first race? I think it was the first time I've ever seen everyone unify to detest a racer as much as I mean, he wasn't a popular figure before he came into the season because of his off the track antics. I mean,
I think antics is putting it lightly.
Yeah, I'm trying to be somewhat courteous and professional in the way that I say it. But I mean, what exactly was it again? Was he being inappropriate with women, right?
Yes, there's been multiple incidents throughout the time. There's been times where he's crashed in F2, or like he's had a crash with someone. Afterwards he went up and he assaulted them.
Jesus.
Then he posted a video on his Instagram of him feeling up a woman and then apologized and then deleted his apology. There's a lot of like controversy. And then, you know, his team said, you know, we've seen this, we're going to deal with it internally. And then nothing ever came of it. Never mentioned again, swept under the rug, because his dad is a billionaire and he pays the team loads of money in sponsorships. So essentially, and that's where the hashtag, which F1 have been using, "We Race as One," people started saying "We race as money, we race for money." Like, do you know what I mean? It's if you've got enough money, you can get away with it. And, you know, it's been seen in plain sight that this guy, who's, you know, don't know what I can say on here, but not a very nice fella.
You've done well.
You know, he's getting away with it, and, you know, he's just doing exactly what he wants, and with no repercussions. I think fans are trying to stand up for it, but
unfortunately, people, if anyone's watching, that's the world. The richest people get away with everything. That is, if you've got money, then you don't have to worry, because nothing will ever happen to you if you've got enough money. Which is why I hope to get rich. Of course, I'm joking. But yeah, it is a bit of a strange one. And look, it just makes it all the more sweeter that he crashed in his first race. I mean, it doesn't look like he's one of the more talented drivers. Obviously, he's in F1 for a reason, but compared to the other drivers we've seen, and, you know, I think the general consensus is that he isn't that talented, or he's not going to be a world champion anytime soon, unless his dad match fixes or race fixes, I don't know what you want to call it. But yeah, right. Let's move on then. Fantastic little discussion there. Hopefully we're going to be more F1 this year. I am actually looking to get into that, as well as basketball and football and other things. Tennis. I love tennis, especially Wimbledon, and some of the clay tournaments as well tend to be very good.
Don't step on my toes. Don't step on my toes.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm aiding you. So let's move on to the footy, the football. Woo, 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 woo.
You sound like David Mitchell doing that sketch.
We'll be showing all the football all the time.
Yeah.
Football.
All the football.
All the football. Yeah.
Every day, every hour.
Thousands and thousands of hours of football.
Giants versus minnows. David and Goliath. Yeah, Harry Kane. We got two strikers in the Premier League, right? That we always debate. I mean, in my little, you know, friendship group, got two of my mates. Always. One of them's a Spurs fan, one of them's a City fan. Constantly debating or arguing who's better, Harry Kane or Sergio Aguero? And I tend to side with Harry Kane. But Sergio Aguero is, of course, leaving Man City, and Harry Kane has been. There's been a lot of talk of him leaving Spurs, really, because Spurs, of course, were knocked out of the Europa League catastrophically. Somehow, it still baffles me that they actually lost this game. They lost 3-0 to Dinamo Zagreb, a team who, let's not forget, had their manager in prison for this game. He was sentenced to prison, so they had a caretaker manager take charge, and they won 3-0. This guy was tactically outclassing Mourinho from a jail cell. He was probably on the phone to his assistant, like, that sort of thing. He was using his one phone call for the day just for that match. Unbelievable. I mean, what I have to say, a hat trick from was it Orsic, the Zagreb forward? Unbelievable hat trick. Really, really good goals. And Spurs just had absolutely nothing. They didn't look like they were fighting in the game at all until the last sort of 10, 15 minutes when they were 2-0 down. And by that point, it was already too late because Zagreb had all the momentum. Of course, so they're knocked out. I genuinely thought that Spurs could win the Europa League. And you would have thought with the squad that they had, that they really should at least make the final. With some of the teams that are in there, no disrespect to them, but the Europa League isn't fantastic. I mean, we got to the quarterfinals and we weren't brilliant in the second half of the season. It's one of those where it's frustrating because you bring in Mourinho to get trophies and they just haven't. It's not really been a success. If they can't really sack him because he's got a massive clause in his contract. So if they do sack him, he'll get a big payoff. So they would have spent a whole lot of money again without getting the end result that they wanted. Sam, with Kane looking to maybe leave because he's at the point now where he's 27, 28. He needs to go and get his one big move now, I think, and try and get some trophies, doesn't he?
I kind of like the idea of him always being a Tottenham player. But at the same time, from an England perspective, you want your best players to know how to win trophies. And right now, we've got some who do and a majority who don't. That's the only disadvantage of calling up players from smaller teams, in my opinion, is that they don't know how to win trophies. And when your star man, your key forward, hasn't won a trophy either, suddenly you're in a position where there's that whole, can they handle the big moments? And if he was to leave and replace Aguero at City, let's say, he would have the best manager in the world right now, teaching him how to score more goals, how to utilize his, abilities for the best, and he'd be winning trophies and he'd know how to, finish games off, how to, just win the crucial points and the crucial games along a season that you don't get when you're middling in the sort of the top six pack and you're getting knocked out by Zagreb in the Europa League,
Yeah.
A good run in the Champions League to the latter stages like he had with Tottenham when they got to the final again, but with City, and he'd look a completely different player for England because he'd know how to manage the games.
Yeah. Matt, do you think that City, with Aguero leaving this summer, they're going to obviously replace him, and it is pretty much a conversation between Harry Kane and Erling Haaland. Who do you think that City should sign out of the two?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't. Kane's what? You said 28. I always thought he was older. He looks older.
Just been around for a while.
Yeah. That's it. It's thrown me that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if would you take a punt on sort of Haaland, the younger one, as opposed to Kane, who perhaps has got less of his playing career ahead of him. I mean,
yeah. I mean, one of the things.
But they've been doing all right without. I mean, Aguero has been, he's been played with injuries last year plus. So I mean, is it really crucial that they bring in this massive star to kind of replace, or?
It's true, but I mean, Pep Guardiola himself has said that they do want to replace him. And I guess the question is, style of player. Haaland is a very, very good goal threat, but we have seen the Bundesliga tax, as we bracket it, take a toll on some players. Timo Werner, unbelievable in the Bundesliga, but has really struggled when it comes to the Premier League. In the way City see it, is that they could spend a lot of money on Kane and get 3 or 4 years out of him, maybe, and then they could just buy Haaland anyway in 3 or 4 years when he's at the peak of his powers, when he's hitting the prime of his career. So I guess for City, it's kind of like a win-win, because the amount of money that they have, the way I would see if I was their board, is either way they're going to end up with Haaland at some point. So I think from a business standpoint, it makes sense to maybe go for Kane first, who knows the Premier League. You're going to get 20 goals out of Harry Kane. And let's be honest, he's getting 20 goals a season in a Spurs team that, like I said, hasn't been competing, really. If you stick him in that City team, he could be unbelievable. The way he links up play, the way he gets in positions to score goals. Pep Guardiola loves a striker that can bring others into play. That's part of his formation. Everything has to be fluid. And I think Harry Kane suits that more than Haaland. I don't see Haaland as a striker that brings others into play. He's a goal scorer. And for me, as well, the attitude thing. I know that I like it, that Haaland's got that bit of an edge about him, but Pep Guardiola likes to have players that don't do that. That's why he's never really had much joy with big dressing room attitudes. So in that sense, Sam, who do you think City would go for out of the two?
Should go for is Kane. Will go for is Haaland.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Kane fits the bill. I don't think Guardiola will be there long enough to get the best out of Haaland in the middle of his career, like in his prime. Whereas Kane is in his prime right now and fits that bill of not just being the furthest man forward, but also being somewhere between the midfield and the attackers. And he's fine playing passes. I mean, look how many assists he's got this season for Heung-min Son. It's not just about scoring goals with him. Haaland has that to him as well, but I think his game is far more about being strong, fast, absolutely amazing at finishing from anywhere on the pitch. Kane is far more about, if you give me a chance in the box, I'm going to score it, but anywhere else on the pitch, and I'm going to give the ball to the right person and create chances for other people.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the most important things for them at the moment, is that they make sure they do replace him. I mean, let's talk about Sergio Aguero for a bit then, because I know we're talking about replacing some stuff, but I think we should take a bit of time to maybe just appreciate how good this guy was for City. Of course, scoring the iconic title-winning goal against QPR. I mean, I still remember that to this day. It's absolutely superb moment. And I think it's a moment that, a lot of us will never forget, even as neutrals, even people who weren't City fans. It certainly, he's one of the all-time greats. And I think, it's sad to see him go, to be honest. 257 goals in 384 appearances for Man City. He's been one of those players, been unlucky, to be honest. He's won titles, he's won FA Cups. He's never won a Golden Boot, though. And I don't think he ever got into the team of the season or got PFA Player of the Year, which is just unbelievable, really, when you think about everything that he's achieved. Do you think he's going to be a big miss for the league, guys? I mean, I personally always enjoyed watching him play. Scored a couple against us. But he was always a very decent player. Just unfortunate that he's had so many injury problems. Because, I mean, if you can imagine what his goal scoring record would be like without the injuries, you're talking at least 250 goals. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's done for that club. Well, and not 250 goals, but I'm talking like 250 Premier League goals. He could easily get there. So I don't know. It is a real shame.
Yeah, he just needed a couple of seasons. Personally, he needed this season to not be injury affected, and everyone would be remembering and sort of rekindling that love for Sergio Aguero. The fact we've not seen much of him for a year and a half, 2 years, you kind of forget just how good he was. And I mean, nobody's ever going to forget. It was probably the most iconic moment, or one of, in football history was that goal against QPR. I'm not going to say it was the top moment ever, but as far as, individual moments go, that can't really be topped by much else. Maybe, Solskjaer in the Champions League final tops it just because of the occasion. But yeah, I mean, if you'd had 2 more years of Aguero where one of the seasons was him fully fit and the other season was him just scoring goals in the few games he had, everyone would remember how good he was, and he might have hit that 200 goals in the Premier League.
Yeah. I mean, Matt, where do you think he goes now then? What do you think is the next step? There's been talk of Barcelona and Chelsea. Would he go back to Argentina maybe? That would be a huge move for him to go to maybe a Boca Juniors or, River Plate, something like that, one of the 2 big powerhouses. What do you think's next for his career?
This is Aguero, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see him going to any of the big clubs. I just don't. Do you know what I mean? He's been at Man City, he's been at one of the other big clubs for a period of time. He's done amazing things, don't get me wrong, their highest goal scorer, and like a club legend, but he's sort of old. He's had a 10-year career there. Is he really going to perform the same somewhere else? At the age that he is, and given the last sort of season or 2 where he's had injuries and he's not really been performing at his peak.
Well, I'm
I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to cut you off there because we're running out of time. So I think we're going to end the episode there. I think we've had a good amount of discussion. So thank you, everyone, for watching the episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down in the comments below. Give us some topics that you want us to cover, of course, as usual. Thank you to Pint Sport thank you to Live at the Quays for making this happen. Take care, guys.